So, John, maybe we can begin with you know how you first came to develop a sense of connection to the matters that we're going to be talking about, whether you call them spiritual or whatever term you want to use. How early in life did you first develop that sense?
Well, I suppose with my first breath, if I could remember it, James. I don't know, my dear, when it started. I suppose it's just natural. I was born a country boy. I was. There weren't any other children, really. Then the war broke out, which meant we were very isolated, and I spent my childhood pretty much alone. I mean, in the fields around my home. So I'm used to not talking and just being in the fields. Second nature to me. Nowadays, all that's called being spiritual, I suppose, isn't it? But to me, long before I ever heard of any of these complicated words, it was just natural.
Right.
I suppose I can answer you a bit more sensibly because when I was sent to boarding school at the age of 7, and from 7 to 18, I was at boarding school, and my antidote to the noisy, competitive world of other little boys, which I didn't care for very much, was to get out to the fields whenever I could. So I suppose you could say that was my that was my early early seeking an alternative to the less meaningful world of perhaps the less comfortable world of humanity. Yes.
Right. I think you've hinted at something powerful in how you speak about these matters, in that, correct me if I'm wrong, but you seem to view it as recognizing something that's always there. It's always around us. It's not something you have to cultivate and develop and go out and try to attain, but it's always here.
Absolutely not. But the trouble is, we get so confused by being educated and reading a lot of complicated books and listening to things that we lose that inherent common sense, natural common sense, and then it takes most of our life to rediscover it.
Do you think in a conversation like ours that we'll be helping people to see what we're talking about, or are we just going to add to the confusion?
Well, we'll do our best, won't we, James?
But do you think language is, I guess this is a paradox, isn't it? That you speak about kind of stillness and being present, but we also obviously spend time trying to help others to recognize these things by talking, by communicating. Do you see that as a difficult thing to reckon with?
Well, words have their place, don't they? And indeed, we spend much of our lives, and indeed much of my life, I lost my direction too, and got caught up in this general belief that the only communication was words. And then I think, well, I was always a countryman. I was a farmer, James. And so I always came back to my fields, the silence of my fields. So on the one hand, I was absorbing all the philosophy and the teachings of religion and all this. On the other hand, I had access to the woods and the fields. So I suppose in my mind there was always this, I had both really. And I always loved silence. I never much cared for much talking. Yes, I fully recognize that, like this interview, and we are using words, but I suppose not so long ago, I developed the confidence that the real communication, the most meaningful of all communications, the infallible communication, is actually silence. That is the real language, you know. The language, if you like, of the heart. The language that passes all barriers. Think of the talking to the trees, talking to the fields, talking to the stars. No words needed, are there? You know, the very word communication means the oneness, doesn't it? Well, the moment we start using words, you separate the oneness, don't you? Because words divide. Anything that you give a name to, you put it in a little box, which makes it distinct from anything else. Whereas the real communication, which is the sharing of one, is best communicated by silence. Look, just if I look beyond the screen, there's the sky, the beautiful sky. One sky. You and I are both under the sky. One sky. Sky doesn't need to say anything, does it? It's just there. Just the silent witness to one.
I think that's a wonderful link you've just drawn between, you know, when we use words, certain words like stillness, I think you've used a lot as a kind of useful word. And you mentioned oneness as well. And to some people, they may say, well, you have stillness on the one hand, and then you have oneness, but how are they related? But I feel like you've just said when you're still, there are no words, there's nothing to divide the one.
James, I've got a very useful little sequence in my mind. Silence, stillness. Silence is still, isn't it? And stillness is silent. Silence, stillness, presence, space. Now, where does one end and the other begin? What is the difference, really? Silence, stillness, presence, space, spirit. Isn't it all the same? Where does one end and one begin? What is spirit? And if you want to use the word God, where does God fit in? God is spirit. And where does it all happen but right here and now, in the present moment? You and I are talking in silence, aren't we? There's this silent, invisible enfoldment that contains us, which we're usually unaware of, but is there in every situation, infallible, unchanging, eternal, while the performance of time takes place within it, unshakable. And silence, you see, is a very valuable first step in this sequence. Stop talking, silence, immediately you have access to something that's bigger and just simply expands into the infinite without end.
I think the word presence as well, I like that sequence going from stillness into presence, because it seems to me that partly what we recognize is that we are presence or being or whatever this thing is that's eternal, that's always here, that's always given in the stillness. Do you think presence, is that an important part of this?
Well, it's just words, aren't they?
Yeah.
We use words because we're sort of hooked onto them. I'm conditioned to use words, but really what are words? What are words? They're just words, aren't they? You don't have to call it anything. It's just natural, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the grass knows it naturally. Everything knows it naturally except man. The only creature that doesn't know it is man.
You also described it as the kind of gateway to the infinite, that it's when we're really present, the present, we recognize it as this kind of eternal now.
Yeah. Well, that's become the sort of later sort of fashionable phrase, hasn't it? But it's very meaningful. Yes. The normal human condition is that we're absent from the presence of God, hence all our problems. Hence we die and experience poverty and all our human lacks, ignorance. Isn't it that simple? Oh, you're a highly qualified man. I'm just a simple farmer, dear. But to me, it seems as simple as pie. Why do we make it all so complicated?
I think you're right. I often feel like I should rein myself in and talk less and take the lesson from you. And maybe as I age, I'll become quieter and quieter, because it really is that simple.
It really is, James. And see, now I'm an old man, I have the confidence to say so. For so much of our life, we think we have to conform, don't we? Well, I did, my dear, of course I did. And people laugh at you if you don't, People say, why can't you be normal? Why can't you just talk like everybody else? And, all these things caused me much distress throughout my life. But see, now I'm just an old fool. I can just keep quiet and smile.